Brilliant, eye-opening conversation there from Jarek, Temi, and Nicole. So thanks, guys. I think that conversation really did a good job of highlighting just how complex the modern gaming ecosystem has become, and showed that the real risk in global gaming isn't just inside the platform itself, but across the vast web of dependencies, partners, and third-party services that keep these worlds running. I think the insights from Xbox and Riot Games made one thing clear, that resilience in gaming isn't just about protecting the platform, it's about securing the entire ecosystem around it. Okay, so staying within the realm of entertainment, our next presentation only serves to reiterate that no industry is safe from cyber threats, with a deep dive into the unseen vulnerabilities of today's entertainment ecosystem, from on-set systems and cloud-based editing suites to global content delivery networks. This session explores where cyber risk hides in the production to distribution workflow, and how a single breach can leak multi-million-dollar assets before release. So it's going to be another good presentation on stage. So please join me in welcoming to the platform Daniel Meacham, VP Cybersecurity and Operations, CSO and CISO for Legendary Entertainment.
All right, hey guys, how's it going? How many of you guys work in the movie business? Oh yeah, all right. Now, okay, now you got to keep me honest. So it's all good stuff. So I am Dan, and we're going to talk about some really cool things with the movies. So let's go ahead and, does the clicker not want to work? Oh, I pushed the wrong button. There we go. So a little bit about Legendary. So Legendary Entertainment, we make movies, and we also have television shows, and we also have a nice digital presence with Nerdist.com, and we also do comic books. And then sometimes we make movies from the comic books and vice versa. So there's a bunch of really great, crazy things, but you're probably asking yourself, when we think about where we are in the movies, there's a whole cornucopia of crazy things that go on behind the scenes and everything else. And so if you haven't seen anything behind the scenes, we're going to give you a lot of spoilers. I don't want to ruin the magic for you guys, but there's some really cool things that we want to go through. But then it's like any other business when you're trying to secure the assets. There's a lot of different things that we got to kind of take a look at. So when we think about movies in general, and then when we think about, well, if you were to take my position and be responsible to cover all the cyber stuff, all the content security, all the brand enforcement, and even some of the physical security elements of it, you're probably asking yourself, well, what are the most critical things and common things that you see that happen when we think about these things? And for the most part, you always think about leaks, right? Ooh, somebody leaked the movie from this or something like that. There were some pictures that showed up out there. Well, these two particular case examples with our movie Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla X Kong, we actually had the movie leaked through our supply chain on the end, and so we'll talk about what all that kind of looks like. But then we also had some pictures that leaked, and for the most part, we do a really good job of containing all the imaging and everything else that we have. But when you film in public spaces, it's really hard to keep people off the streets that are taking pictures. And so these things kind of lean in. So to really kind of help this out, I really want to just kind of, no quiz after this, just real quick explain what the workflow looks like and what we're trying to secure. So the first phase, when we want to make a movie, and something to think about is every movie is pretty much treated as if it's its own company. So it has its own tech stack that comes in, its own equipment that they want to use, its own budget. And some movies may take 6 months to a year. Other movies may take up to 3 years to do. And so when you think about that tech stack, this particular director wants to have like an 8K camera to film everything in. And then, after 3 years, they want to do a sequel. Well, he wants the latest and greatest. So we're not buying all this new technology. We're basically renting it and everything else like that. But anyway, in the first phase, when we go through this is the development phase. This is where somebody may have an idea and say, hey, I want to make a movie about sneakers or something, right? And so as we go through the development phase, this is where you kind of write what you want in the script. You think about, who do I want the actors to be? Who would be a really good person to be the producer or the director to go through it? And you go through the whole process. And then you kind of estimate what your budget is going to be with it. So that whole element of it, is it any different than protecting your documents and everything else that you have in your normal business, right? So then that kind of leads into the second phase, which is called pre-production. And inside pre-production, this is where we actually start taking the script, breaking it down to the different elements. We're looking for, let's make a schedule. So if we're making a movie and it has a bunch of scenes that are in a hospital, a high-speed car chase, or something else going on, what we want to do then is focus with that to say, well, how can we maximize that schedule to say, we're going to do all the hospital scenes for the movie on these 4 days. And then the other things you have to think about is, well, what do we have in our schedule when is talent available? Because you may have some actors and actresses that can only work on certain parts, but then they got to go do another movie somewhere else or some other engagement. So it's a really fine art to kind of lay all these things together. And then the other thing that you have, and by this time, you're giving your movie a code name because you don't want to tell anybody any spoilers. And not only that, the title may change. But in this also phase here, we're also aligning who we want for our staff and for our teams and building the production office. And so think about, you're starting a business from the ground up. You're creating a production office on location where you're going to start filming. And so do that, you got to set up the printers, you got to set up the emails and everything else. In the development phase, it was only maybe about 8 to 12 people. In the pre-production phase, we probably have maybe about 100 folks, staff members, crew, working on this. And when we think about this particular phase as well, we're also doing scouting for where we want to film. So like if we want to film over in Abu Dhabi or here in Saudi Arabia, or we're going to film in Hawaii or Australia, we have folks that fly out to those locations, they check it out, they say, yep, this is what we want to do, then they coordinate with getting the appropriate permits and everything else associated to get it back into that schedule to say, we can film in this location during these days, but these other days it's a holiday or there's a hurricane coming or some other chaotic thing that's going on. So we kind of do all of this in this particular phase. And then that kind of leads into the next phase, which is actually production. And you may actually hear this as principal photography. Now, what's really cool about this particular part is we have some folks that film on film, some film digital, and there's a lot of different things that go through this. But even as we're filming this whole part, we actually lean into the next phase, post-production, where we may be doing some visual effects, and we need to go back and do some reshoots. Well, that's fine. And then the last phase, again, this is it for the really crazy slides. This is the actual distribution piece, right? Now, you see there's a line between phase 4 and phase 5. That's the cutover. So like Legendary, we may make a movie, we write the story, we film it, put it all together, do all of the editing and everything else that we did in post and everything else, and then once it's picture locked, which is where that line is, we hand it over to a distributor. So if you ever watch the movies and you're like, why are there 5 logos at the beginning? Well, let's say for example for Godzilla versus Kong, you'll see our logo at the beginning because we made that movie. You'll see a Warner Brothers logo because they're the ones who take it and put it into the theater or move it onto the streaming video like HBO Max or iTunes or what have you. But then also you'll see maybe Toho Studios will have a logo because they own the rights to Godzilla, right? It's their monster. And then you also may see another logo for, that's in Chinese because that's who's distributing for us in China or in your local regional area with the partnering of a distributor or another studio. So that's where that kind of comes in. But each one of these different phases have really unique challenges that we kind of need to navigate to go through. So kind of to look back at that, as we kind of talk through and think through some of these other different things, the pre-production, yes, that's where you're sharing Word documents or whatever. You're in the cloud, you have a collaboration space. That should be the standard block and tackle that you have every day that you kind of go through. And in this particular case, when we filmed Detective Pikachu, the director wanted to actually film it with film, not digital, which is great because you don't have leaks, but it also makes it a little bit more complicated on some of the other different things that you have in your supply chain. Like, for example, folks that are out there on set with you that are extras, and they're like, hey, I'm out making a movie. Let me take a picture of myself. Here I am, right? Oh, that's not very cool. Because now what ends up happening, oh, and by the way, AI made that picture for me because we didn't want us to have any spoilers to get anybody in trouble. But anyway, the challenges that we run into this is you can't do that. That's, one, you sign an NDA, you're not going to do it. But then the other thing, too, there may be elements in the background that we need to protect, right? So there may be copyrighted materials. Maybe the talent doesn't want to be seen or some of the other different pieces. And so we have to work through with our cast and crew to say, we know you're excited to work on this movie. So if you want to post images, we give them an email address to send their request to with the content that they want to post on their social media. Because we do like to have them celebrate what the project is we're working on and everything else, but sometimes we're like, don't post this until after this date, because maybe the marketing team, they want to have a special reveal at, before a trailer comes out or something like that. Or maybe there's elements in this that we're going to cut from the movie, but we may use in a sequel or some other different piece. So these are some of the different dynamic challenges that we have to work through. But again, not everything that we have to look at is technical. This is obviously something that is more of a communication, awareness, training. It's a people issue, because a lot of our leaks, I would say 98% of them, are people-related issues, not necessarily technology issues. And so when we look at some of the other different things is, yes, we can try to lock things in with how we protect things on set with the cast and crew, but sometimes when you film out in an open space, there's really not that much you can do about keeping everybody else from taking pictures of what you're doing. Like in this particular case, I think this was Pacific Rim. Everybody's on the beach, they're supposed to be looking at a giant monster going like, run away! But, and that's why they're all looking and pointing up. But that's in a very large space. It's not like we can put screens around and say, you can't take pictures. So you just have to have like an acceptable risk, or you just know this is going to happen. So then you kind of think, how can you work the narrative to get the locals to be all excited about it and to be doing smart things. So then there's a couple other different things when we think about what we have in our supply chain, apart from filming on location. There is this other piece when we look in post-production, such as the visual effects. So in this particular case, this is Enola Holmes. And you can see that obviously there's a green screen there, because this is on a sound stage, and there's really not a lot of stuff going on there. But you look in the background, you're like, oh wow, check it out. I didn't see that building. Well, it's not real. That's post-production, they put it in. Now, when we film that shot and we have all the digital assets, then it goes over to a third party, and then they create the assets and put it into the background for us, right? So that means the movie that we filmed, all the content we have, we sent it to a third party, and now that third party has all of our stuff, and they're doing the work on our behalf. So this is where it gets kind of interesting, because how can I trust them with my stuff? How can I trust them as a custodial of my material and my data? And so we have to do a lot of security assessments, security reviews, and then, like this particular company may also have other folks down the line that may be subcontractors and so forth. So it gets really interesting on how to work through this. And so another area to look at that is think about localization. And so you're asking, well, what is localization? Localization is where we take a movie that's in English and we bring it over here. Then we need to add subtitles, or we do voiceovers where there's dubbing and things like that. And it's really interesting when you think about where AI is in this place, because it does a really good job for the most part. But that whole localization, to give them this, we'll give them the movie, but we may give them the movie in black and white. We'll give them the movie with a bunch of watermarks and spoilers on it. So if the localization folks have a hack and it leaks out, we know exactly where in the supply chain it came from, right? And then also it has minimal impact because, maybe the images are reversed, it's all in red and high contrast, it's grainy, it has, other different things that kind of work with that spoilage. So those are some of the different things that we have to look at when we look at the overall supply chain when we work for some of these different folks. Now, the other thing that runs into really interesting challenges is we don't pick up our entire team and take them out to set. We hire local teams to do some of these different things. And so that's the grip, the sound guys like who mic me up and everything else like that. And so we have to deal with the technology that they may have readily available or whatever we can find in that local region, and then having to work through that. Because when we think about the technology that we have from the camera, we actually stream from the camera to devices. So let's say, for example, we are shooting a scene and we have to cut for some reason, and then we have to come back and reset that scene. Well, you got to make sure that the product placement's in the right place. That if your hair is coming down one side and then next is on the other side and it comes back. You ever watch a TV show where the continuity is just kind of weird? Where it's like they're sitting, now they're standing, now they're sitting again. Well, that's where by taking the pictures as we're streaming it straight from camera, that helps us to get that set or that reframe back into place before we go on to the next shot. And so here's what's really interesting when we do that. When we stream from camera to device, And in this case, we look at everything as a piece of equipment. So as an iPad or an iPhone or something else, and we stream there, we will stream from the camera, but we'll put spoilers on there, such as watermarks and everything else. Because as you're getting it on your phone, you're going to take screenshots of it, and you want to be able to do that, right? Well, we got to think about the security on your phone, because where's that picture go when you take it? Is it going to your iPhotos or your Google Photos? Is it replicating out to all your other applications, right? Or do you have, like, I don't know, maybe a solitaire card game on your phone that has access to your photos to put on the backside of the picture, and then lo and behold, all those photos are being uploaded to the developer, right? So these are different things that we have to think about in our supply chain about how we protect all these different pieces. And again, a lot of it comes down to education. And then in the cases on some of these different things on high-profile films, we say you can't use a personal device to do streaming on set. Here's a piece of equipment that you check out, that you use, and then we offload everything as we go through it. Because here's the other really interesting thing as well. So this is another phase. This is when, during COVID, we went to virtual productions, all right? So instead of a green screen, where we are today with the technology, this is called a volume wall, right? So that is a 10K wall that is running real-time images. And so most of the time in this industry, we use the Unreal Engine. So if you ever play games like Fortnite and things like that, it's the same engine. And what's really cool when we look at this particular piece, so that's the actress. She's hiding behind a rock. There's actually a little LED thing that's flickering to make it look like fire, right? And then as the camera pans up, you know, what's really cool is on the top of the camera, if you can see it, there's a spider. And that spider is linked to all these sensors that are on the ceiling. So as the camera pans up, the background can rotate. And so instead of actually doing everything with a green screen, it's all live, real happening. And then as you can see over the right-hand side, we're streaming across the world because maybe the graphic artist that's helping with the virtual world that they created, maybe they're working in Japan. Maybe the producer is traveling over in another location and they want to watch what we're shooting that particular day as we go through it, so they can say, hey, I need you to move this tree, and they can do it real time. Now, here's the other really cool about this particular technology that we have in place today, is these walls can actually even go all the way over to the ceiling. And so now the director may say, hey, I want the sun to be over right here. They can draw a little circle, now the sun's there. They can make it hot, make it cold, you know, more blue, more red. And as that light from that sun casts the shadows onto the costumes, it's actually doing the same rays for everything in the background. Now, what's great about something with this type of set location is once we're done shooting the scene, we could just rotate the world and nobody has to move. The camera doesn't have to move or anything else. We're just moving the world behind them as we go through some of these different pieces. And so that's like really amazing, cool stuff. But now you got to think about like, are they using Zoom or are they using Teams? How do I secure that? You know, if we're streaming these different things worldwide, what type of channel are we using? What kind of encryption are we using? So there's all these other different facets and things that we got to look at when we look at securing the technology in order to make this actually work. And it's really exciting. So if you ever have you watched Mandalorian and some of the more recent episodic like television shows that you can stream and they look like movie class features? That's because they're using this technology. Now, one thing to notice is you'll never see their feet, right? Because they don't want to show any of the scenes or anything else like that. And they have different props, but that really saves us a lot. So when you think about when we had the green screen and we wanted to shoot those people on the breach screaming at the monster, you know, doing that whole green screen and doing all the other different things with it, you know, let's say that was a 6 to 8 week process in post-production. By doing it this way, we shorten it down to maybe 4 or 5 days. And shortening it down to that many days saves a ton of money when you think about how much it costs to have all the staff and everybody there to do some of these different shows. So some of the other different things that we want to kind of take a look at is not all leaks actually come from the content itself that you shot. Like in this particular case, that little white square up at the top, when we released Godzilla X Kong, or is that, no, maybe that's Godzilla versus Kong, no, it's Godzilla X Kong, it doesn't really matter. Nonetheless, there's a special kaiju at the end that nobody knew was going to be in the movie. It was a big surprise. And lo and behold, at one of the toy conventions, they had it out on the shelf. Because, you know, when you release the movie, you want to have the merchandise readily available, so when they say like, I love this movie, I got to buy a shirt, I got to get the little doll or whatever. So you have to have that whole supply chain manufacture those merch in order to have it ready for sale. And then also, if you think about like if you're doing a movie that's by a major holiday or something like that, you want to have all the merch readily available to celebrate. And so that's another venue or an avenue that we look at that we want to make sure that we can lock things down to secure and to have some trust to go through that. And that's just really crazy. Major spoiler leak for that one. Now, the other thing that we do in our post-production is we do test screenings. And so the movie may not be finished. It may be a bunch of like strings and green screens and dots on people's faces. But we want to screen the movie because we want to see, does the story make sense? Do the jokes work? Do people cry? Do they laugh? And so we record and get the audience sentiment, their expression. And then we interview them at the end and say, hey, was it too fast, too slow? What did you like about the movie? What you didn't like about the movie? And then they go back and they either rewrite some lines or they re-edit it to do different things, because there's a lot of things we can do in post-production behind the scenes that you don't see. And so that's one faculty of it. And with that, even though we collect devices before we do the screening, we still have night vision goggles, because believe it or not, when you use infrared cameras, your phone is going to be a beacon of light showing that, hey, somebody's recording something, right? And I know we have a guy with a camcorder and nobody uses camcorders, but it's really crazy that when we release a movie opening day, we have folks out there that can record it with your phone, and the quality on your phone is DVD, if not Blu-ray quality. You can film in 4K. And if you're filming off of an IMAX, that's crazy. So we have to find ways to go after the leakers and things like that. And so we do different spoilers. So there may be like a little dot somewhere hidden that you don't see. So we know, oh, they recorded it at this theater in this country, and we can kind of trace down the workflow from that perspective. So anyway, to kind of sum it up, because we're kind of ran out of time, and I mean, I could talk about this for like hours. I'd be really excited. I got a lot of really cool pictures we can go through, a lot of great stories. It really has a lot that you have to pull together to kind of orchestrate, to do different things, to have it all come together. And so if you ever want to, that's my LinkedIn. Be happy to connect. I'd be happy to walk through this, talk through some things. Maybe you have some questions on that. It's a very similar approach that we have to address for the challenges that we have in our space. Phone calls are cheap. Emails are cheap, and I really love what I do. And by the way, side note, so that's the chicken jockey from Minecraft, our movie. I don't know if any of you guys saw it, but that particular scene was recorded so much and posted on social media. Our content security was like, whoop, we got to take it down because it's a leak. And marketing comes running over and it's like, no, there's like 1 million likes on it. You got to leave it up. It's free marketing. And so we had to train our systems to allow the chicken jockey scene to be released in theaters. So there you go. I love you guys. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And this has been a great experience. Thank you.